250,000 people could be pushed into poverty. I guess, on a human level, not just a political level, that must be a difficult thing, a difficult consequence.
Well, starting with that human level, my own family has been impacted by disability all my life. My late mother was extremely ill all her life, and my late brother, who lived in Yorkshire, was very ill and disabled, particularly when he got cancer, which he died of. So I do understand that human level. But we're addressing something which is a system which isn't working. We've got 1 million young people, 1 in 8, who are neither learning nor earning, who are going effectively from school onto some sort of benefit. Now, some of them will need that support. I don't deny that for a moment. But it can't be right that this growing number of young people, when all the evidence shows that if you're going essentially from school to some sort of benefit, then you're not likely to have the chance to get a job that's going to be secure and well paid for the rest of your life. That cannot be right.
Introduction. The shocking announcement. The political landscape in Britain has been shaken to its very core. A seismic shift no one saw coming, an announcement that has rocked not only the corridors of power, but also the hearts and minds of millions of citizens across the nation. Keir Starmer, leader of the Labour Party, has shocked the country by calling for a snap general election in 2025. At first glance, such a move might seem like a demonstration of political strength and confidence. After all, a general election is the ultimate political gamble, an opportunity to reshape the future of the country, to chart a course for change. However, as the dust settles and the details of his decision begin to unfold, it becomes increasingly clear that this is not a courageous political move, but rather an act of sheer desperation. The truth is, Keir Starmer's leadership has been crumbling under the weight of scandal, dissent, and growing public dissatisfaction. The Labour Party, once seen as the party of integrity and reform, is now struggling to maintain even the semblance of control. It is a party in freefall, with resignations pouring in, MPs jumping ship, and the public's trust in their leader disintegrating. What triggered this desperate call for an election? You may wonder. The catalyst for this political bombshell is nothing less than a Peace 22 billion corruption scandal that has taken the nation by storm. The scandal, which has thrown the Labour Party into complete chaos, has become the ultimate nail in Starmer's political coffin. Once a rising star in British politics, Starmer is now facing a crisis of unprecedented proportions. Behind the scenes, the Labour Party is a powder keg ready to explode. For months, whispers of discontent have echoed through the halls of Westminster, with MPs growing increasingly frustrated with their leader's inability to stem the tide of political turmoil. Starmer's approval ratings have plummeted to historic lows, and his once loyal MPs have begun to turn on him in droves. What was once a unified party is now a fractured shell of its former self, with internal battles raging over his leadership and the future direction of the party. And now, with the Peace 22 billion scandal hanging over him like a sword of Damocles, Starmer has made the fateful decision to call for a general election. The question on everyone's lips is whether this is a bold move to take control of the situation or a desperate attempt to escape the inevitable. Starmer's leadership crisis. As the nation braces for the upcoming election, it is impossible to ignore the sheer weight of the crisis facing Keir Starmer. For months, his leadership has been under constant siege. What started as minor murmurs of discontent has now exploded into a full-scale rebellion within the Labour Party. Starmer's approval ratings have steadily eroded, and his ability to maintain control over his own MPs has become increasingly questionable. Internal polling suggests that trust in his leadership has evaporated, and the once vibrant Labour Party now finds itself teetering on the edge of collapse.
This is a long-standing project and something I committed to before the election, and therefore it's delivering on that promise, and it's consistent with what we did in the spring statement just the other day, which is in a period where the world seems more uncertain and more unstable. It's really important we have economic stability in this country. This is really important. It's a big boost, £415 million on top of the other investment, which will mean better trains, Transpennine in particular, for the region. This is a huge region, many millions of people, huge ambition, brilliant businesses, and the transport system needs to match the ambition of the communities, and that's what we're doing today.
I want to talk to you about the spring statement. We haven't had a chance to talk to you since then, since the impact assessment showed that
the pressure has become unbearable. Senior MPs, who once stood proudly by Starmer's side, are now distancing themselves, quietly strategizing ways to distance themselves from the mounting scandal, that threatens to engulf the party. Behind closed doors, meetings have become battlegrounds, with MPs openly questioning whether Starmer should remain in power until the election at all. Some believe that the internal rebellion will force his resignation before the election even takes place. The calls for Starmer to step down are becoming louder by the hour, with many in the party and the public no longer willing to tolerate his leadership. The situation has become so dire that even those closest to Starmer are questioning his judgment and ability to lead. Senior figures within the Labour Party, who have long been loyal to him, are now openly calling for his resignation. The internal divisions are reaching a boiling point, with the party increasingly divided between those who believe Starmer is the only hope for Labour's future and those who see him as the reason for its downfall. Behind the scenes, the whispers of an internal coup are growing louder. Labour insiders, party veterans, and even some of Starmer's closest allies are reportedly discussing how to remove him from power before the election, fearing that his continued leadership will destroy the party's chances of winning. But it's not just Labour's internal divisions that are making headlines. The public response has been just as damning. Starmer's announcement of the snap election was intended to show leadership, to seize control of the narrative, and provide the public with a sense of direction. Instead, it has sparked outrage across the nation. People aren't buying his excuses anymore. The 22 billion scandal, the policy failures, and the broken promises are all catching up with him. The public has had enough. Social media is ablaze with demands for his immediate resignation, and protests are already being planned across the country. The timing of the election announcement has only deepened the public's anger. Why many are asking, would Starmer call for a general election now, when his party is in crisis, when his leadership is crumbling, and when the Conservative Party, despite its own issues, is beginning to capitalize on Labour's failures? The answer might be more sinister than it appears. Starmer knows that if he waits any longer, the situation will only worsen. More corruption scandals could come to light, more MPs could resign, and more of his secrets could be exposed. By calling an election now, Starmer is hoping to shift the focus from his mounting scandals to a national campaign, hoping that the election will serve as a distraction from the financial disaster at the heart of his government. It's a high-risk gamble, and if it backfires, it could mark the end of his political career for good. But despite his attempts to regain control, Starmer's leadership is under siege from all sides. The Labour Party is in freefall, and with every passing day it becomes increasingly clear that Starmer is losing his grip on power. The 22 billion scandal that has rocked the nation is far from over, and as new details emerge, the public's anger grows ever more intense. In his desperation, Starmer has made a move that will define his political legacy, an election call that may very well be his last, and one that could mark the beginning of the end of his reign as leader of the Labour Party. The 22 billion scandal, unraveling corruption. The P's 22 billion scandal has erupted in the heart of Britain's political system like a violent storm, threatening to sweep away the Labour Party Keir Starmer once stood for. What started as whispers of financial mismanagement within the Labour government has now exploded into a full-blown crisis that is impossible to ignore. It is a scandal of such magnitude that it could change the course of British politics forever, and it has the potential to end Keir Starmer's leadership and possibly his political career in the most spectacular way possible. At the center of this scandal is the missing 22 billion, money that was supposedly allocated for crucial infrastructure projects, public services, and economic recovery plans. But as investigations unfold, it becomes increasingly clear that this money has not gone where it was intended. Instead, reports suggest that large sums have been funneled into questionable contracts, political pet projects, and even foreign investments that benefit no one but a small group of corporate elites, political donors, and shadowy figures with hidden interests in the future of the Labour Party. The money is gone, unaccounted for, and no one, least of all Keir Starmer, seems to have any clear answers about where it went. What's even more damning is the growing suspicion that Starmer's closest allies and key figures in his inner circle were directly involved in orchestrating these financial dealings. It's not just an oversight or a mistake, this is a full-scale financial catastrophe. There are whispers of secret deals, of politicians using taxpayer money to line their pockets, and of financial transactions being manipulated to cover up corruption. Investigative journalists are digging deeper into the scandal, and with every new revelation, the evidence of mismanagement and corruption becomes harder to deny. As the scandal unravels, it's becoming increasingly clear that Starmer's government was not just careless with public funds, it may have actively facilitated the misallocation of taxpayer money. The question on everyone's lips is simple: where did the P's 22 billion go? And why is Starmer refusing to provide clear answers? For weeks, his government has been stonewalling calls for transparency. refusing to release full records of financial transactions and dismissing growing concerns as nothing more than political attacks. But as more evidence comes to light, the truth is becoming undeniable. This scandal goes far deeper than anyone could have imagined. The media has seized on this story with an intensity that has only intensified the public's outrage. The public was already growing increasingly disillusioned with Starmer's leadership, but the scandal has pushed them to the brink. Protesters are flooding the streets, demanding accountability, while social media is ablaze with calls for Starmer's immediate resignation. Labour's supporters, once loyal to the leader they believed would bring integrity back to politics, now feel betrayed. They are questioning whether the man who promised to root out corruption is, in fact, at the very heart of one of the biggest financial scandals in modern British history. But it's not just the public that is turning against Starmer. Labour MPs who once stood firmly behind him are now beginning to jump ship. Some have resigned in protest, unwilling to be associated with what they see as a political disaster that threatens to destroy the party's future. Others are distancing themselves, issuing vague statements about concerns over financial mismanagement, but avoiding directly condemning their leader. There are even rumours of an internal coup, as senior party figures discuss the possibility of forcing Starmer out before the election to prevent further damage. In private meetings, MPs are debating whether it's possible to salvage the party's credibility without completely severing ties with their embattled leader. The growing internal dissent has placed Starmer in an incredibly precarious position. With the 22 billion scandal hanging over his head, it's no longer just a question of political survival, it's a question of how much longer he can keep the Labour Party from completely falling apart. If the scandal isn't enough to destroy his leadership, the internal rebellion and the growing public backlash may be the final blows. Starmer is no longer leading his party, he's scrambling to keep it together, hoping that an election can somehow turn the tide in his favour before it's too late. But as each day passes, it becomes more apparent that the Labour Party is teetering on the edge of collapse, and it may not survive the chaos. Internal rebellion, the Labour Party in disarray. Inside the Labour Party, the situation has become a full-scale rebellion. What was once a united political force is now fractured beyond recognition. Labour MPs are resigning in droves, and those who remain are locked in fierce debates about Starmer's leadership. Some MPs are still loyal to him, but they are increasingly in the minority. The growing discontent within the party is being fueled by the ever-expanding scandal, with some Labour figures arguing that Starmer's leadership has become untenable and that he must step down before the election. The rebellion is not limited to MPs. Long-time Labour supporters, grassroots activists, and party donors are also turning against Starmer. Many who once saw him as a leader who would bring integrity back to British politics now feel betrayed. They are questioning whether Starmer's promises of transparency and honesty were nothing more than empty rhetoric designed to cover up the party's financial mismanagement. Constituency Labour parties across the country are reporting mass unrest, with some members quitting the party altogether and others calling for emergency votes of no confidence in their local MPs if they continue to back Starmer. The trust that once existed between the leader and his supporters has been shattered, and it may never be repaired. Behind the scenes, senior Labour figures are beginning to discuss the possibility of removing Starmer before the election. Some party veterans are even considering a dramatic vote of no confidence against him, a move that would force him out of office immediately and allow the party to replace him with a new leader who can salvage what is left of Labour's credibility. But time is running out, and the longer Starmer clings to power, the more damage he does to the party. His refusal to step down is causing irreparable harm to Labour's image, and some MPs are beginning to openly question whether it is too late for the party to recover. The internal divisions within Labour are now so deep that it's unclear whether the party can survive this crisis, let alone win the upcoming election. The public's anger is only escalating. Protests are erupting in major cities, with furious citizens demanding Starmer's resignation. Social media is flooded with hashtags like Starmer must go and Labour corruption, and for the first time since taking power, Starmer is facing a crisis that he may not be able to talk his way out of. The polls show a sharp decline in support for Labour, with many voters now viewing the party as nothing more than a corrupt institution led by a man who has failed them. The Conservative Party, despite its own internal problems, is beginning to capitalise on Labour's failures, and Starmer's leadership is under attack from all sides. With each passing day, it becomes clearer that the Labour Party is headed for disaster. The 22 billion scandal has exposed the deep rot within the party, and the internal rebellion is threatening to tear it apart. The question now is whether Starmer can survive this unprecedented crisis, or whether his downfall will mark the end of his political career and the collapse of the Labour Party as a viable force in British politics. The stakes couldn't be higher. And as the general election looms, it remains to be seen whether Starmer can regain control of the situation or whether this is the beginning of the end for his leadership.